which then resulted in the miscarriage. And they gave me so much hope. Not only were the ladies in the office amazing and so supportive, as well as the doctor, but they said, here's the plan. We're going to have you on baby aspirin every day. We're going to have you start taking progesterone a few days after you've ovulated to help support any potential pregnancy.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into this episode of Mom Talks with Krista. Today we have an interview about hope, perseverance, and strength. Today's guest is Megan Meisner, and she is going to share all about her fertility journey and what she has gone through to get to her baby boy. She's going to share her story of her 4 different miscarriages and kind of what happened with each one and how she ultimately met her baby boy November 2020. So on top of all that, she had her baby during the pandemic, which is a whole other struggle in itself. So she has gone through a lot, and through everything, she now shares her journey and support for all moms through her Instagram, Megan Meisner Fitness. So check her out. This is an awesome interview. Here we go. All right, guys, today we have Megan Meisner here today, and I'm so excited to get started. I know we're going to talk a little bit about kind of your fertility journey and trying to conceive your son, but let's kind of just start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, absolutely. So first, Krista, I wanted to say thank you for having me on the show. I was listening to one of the episodes last night at like 2 a.m. while I was nursing my baby boy. And one of the things that really caught my attention was when you mentioned that the goal of the podcast is to end mom shaming. And that really resonated with me, but in kind of a different way, because today we're talking about my experience with recurrent miscarriage. And I think that's kind of a secret shame that people don't really talk about. And so by bringing my story to light and sharing it with others, I'm not necessarily a specialist in this area, but I'm really hoping to just hit home with some people who might be afraid to share their story or feel like they're alone. So with that being said, again, my name is Megan Meisner, and I have lived in Auburn, Alabama for the past few years. I moved here to get married to my husband, who was a college friend of mine, and we reconnected years later. And when I moved here from Chicago, I was really excited to start a family. I wanted to get married. I saw us having children. Prior to that, I was in the fitness industry. So doing personal training, teaching fitness classes, and just kind of living the single life. Was completely happy with that, but thought, I don't want to be doing this forever. So moved down here, and our plan really was to just, kind of take it slow. My husband was between jobs for a while, and so we didn't try to conceive right away. And then when we did, little did we know how long it was actually going to end up taking. So we started trying to conceive in May of 2017. And we actually got pregnant with that first attempt. So it was super exciting. I thought, wow, like who knew this was going to be so easy? Little did we know that it would be like a 3 or 4 year process of trying to get pregnant. So with that first attempt, I was maybe 6 weeks into the pregnancy, still really, really early, and I had started to see some spotting. And if you Google anything on the internet about pregnancy and spotting, your stomach drops and you think the worst, that you're possibly miscarrying. So called the doctor, and rather than, have me come in and see me, they said, go to the ER. So we went to the ER, and after several tests and being assessed by the doctor, gave us that really scary, terrible news of you have lost your child. You're no longer pregnant. And what a lot of people don't know is that one miscarriage is fairly common. It happens to about 1 in 4 people. So despite the fact you still feel alone, you still feel absolutely terrified. That same day, while we were at the hospital, my husband had been talking with a potential employer, and he found out while we were in the ER that job had been pulled. So it was just a double whammy. We were completely just like baffled by the news that we had both received. I was given some medication to follow up with the miscarriage and to start the recovery process. And the medication I was given basically sent me into what felt like the worst, most intense labor of my life, and just a lot of physical pain. I actually had to leave the bedroom and come into the guest room that night. And I only knew I was getting better because the physical moans and pain was getting less severe. over time. So by morning, I was a little bit better, but still just not feeling myself. And so then we went through several months before we actually got pregnant again. It wasn't until about a year later in April of 2018. And again, we just natural pregnancy. We weren't really seeing any specialists or trying anything aggressive at this time. And I had gone in for that initial appointment, and the doctor took the blood work to measure the HCG. And, he called and said, are you feeling okay? Are you noticing any cramping? And immediately I just thought, oh, why is he asking this? And he said, your numbers are not increasing, which indicates that you're probably having a miscarriage. And the conversation ended with him saying, just, over the next few days, be conscious of the fact that you might notice some spotting. And if, you feel the need to call us and come in, let us know. And I think I did go in that next week just to have them check the HCG numbers until you reach your baseline of 0 again. So that was the second miscarriage. And, after a year of having the first pregnancy, again, we just were completely discouraged mentally, physically, just everything you're going through at that point. You think, okay, one time I could see, 1 in 4 people go through that. Here's the second time, like it's going to work. And when it doesn't, you're just, again, are completely frustrated. And then the third pregnancy was just a few months later. I had actually been given a small dose of Clomid by this doctor. And the whole time I'm just seeing the OBGYN. So still hadn't gone to the specialist or anything. And received the positive test August or September of 2018, and went in for the baseline and called for the results, which I probably should have just waited for the results and had them call me, because the woman who answered, who I spoke with, I think she was one of the nurses, I don't think she knew the context of why I was calling. And so she reported where the first set of numbers had been and then where the follow-up numbers were. And she's like, so they're on the decline. And so that was how I basically found out about the third miscarriage. And shortly after, the doctor called. I don't think he knew I had already found out from this nurse that I had miscarried. So he went over all of that with me. And at this point, he basically said, I don't think I can help you anymore. I think you need to see a specialist. And he actually had done a significant number of testing with me. We had done an HSG, the semen tests, hysteroscopy, karyotype testing, thyroid testing. I had a fibroid removed. And, I think he was equally as discouraged and suggested I see somebody. And, to be honest, it never had crossed my mind that I should see somebody. To me, going to a specialist meant I'm ready for IVF, sign me up. Like, here I am with my checkbook. I'm ready to pay the big bucks to get a baby. And, with his suggestion, I did go and see a specialist in Birmingham, Alabama. And they had a satellite office in Montgomery, which was much closer to us. And they did some initial testing to look for clotting disorders. And so at that time I was diagnosed as having MTHFR and the PAI1 inhibitor. And so they suggested that those two disorders could have caused clotting, which then resulted in the miscarriage. And they gave me so much hope. Not only were the ladies in the office amazing and so supportive, as well as the doctor, but they said, here's the plan. We're going to have you on baby aspirin every day. We're going to have you start taking progesterone a few days after you've ovulated to help support any potential pregnancy. And then they also said, once you're pregnant again, we're going to have you on Lovenox. So daily blood thinners to help, support this pregnancy and prevent any potential clots. So it felt great. This is wonderful news. And then again, it was right around that 6 or 7 week mark that I did notice some spotting. And so it was probably aside from the physical pain of the first miscarriage, I think mentally and emotionally, it was the most difficult of all of them, just because we went into it thinking we have this action plan. This is what's going to work. And now you're left thinking, okay, if this hasn't worked, like, now what's the plan? So between then and seeing another doctor, I just kind of did my own thing. I took a break from seeing doctors, from doing the trigger shots. We had done a UTI at one point, that obviously hadn't worked either. And so it was December 2019. I went to a different doctor. We did a couple of medicated cycles, again, with the trigger shots, with the Clomid. And then I had gone up to Chicago in February, a couple months later, and my period came. So I called the office and said, hey, I'm out of town. I know I usually need to be evaluated to get on the next cycle of medication. What do I do? Please call me back. And they never called back. So that was actually a blessing in disguise, because obviously without medication, you're trying to get pregnant, like nothing's going to stop you. You're not going to say, oh, well, we'll wait again until the next time. So that cycle was when we actually conceived and had our positive test. And it was in March, just when everything with COVID was starting to really kind of kick off. And so that positive test actually came a couple of days early, before my period was due, which had never happened before. I always had a late positive. And so that to me kind of implied something was maybe wrong with those pregnancies. And that this one now, seeing just that extremely faint line gave me so much hope, thinking, let's see, maybe this will be different. And with that positive test, I went back to that original specialist who had diagnosed me with the PAI1 inhibitor and the MTHFR. And they welcomed me back very warmly, and then started with the Lovenox. And, through the first trimester, everything was going as planned. Second trimester, everything went as planned. Third trimester, up through labor. And now I've got my baby Clancy, who today, as of the day we're recording it in January here, he is now 8 weeks old. And so after going through all of those experiences, it's just crazy to see his face and think, oh my gosh, that is all that we went through to get this little guy. And it's just a miracle. And my goal with talking to you today and sharing my story is just give people that hope. So there's my long-winded tale of how I've gotten to where I am now with my baby boy. But yeah, I really just want to remind people that it's okay to feel vulnerable and to be going through these challenging moments and not to give up.
I love your story just because I think what you're saying, like so many moms go through this and so many women go through trying to conceive and, thinking it's something wrong with them or thinking, they did something. And so I think there's so much, positivity and hope in your story, like you're saying. So like, wow, for moms listening or women listening that are, in that journey right now, what did you do to keep yourself positive through this journey? And I'm sure not all days were positive. I'm sure you had some rough days. So how did you kind of keep pushing in those hard times?
Like I just mentioned, it's extremely difficult to feel like you're not going through this alone. And a big part of the reason I'm sharing my story today is I remember what it felt like to hear others telling their stories of success. And even though I didn't talk to a lot of people about what I was going through at the time, I highly encourage doing that, just because once you've identified somebody who's going through something similar, it's like, oh my gosh, like you're part of my world, like you get this. And really, as far as staying positive, there's a lot of people who, on message boards, on Facebook would say, at what point do you give up? When do you stop trying? And to be honest, like there were definitely those angry moments where I thought, oh, we're not doing this. Like, I'm so mad at the world. I'm so mad at God. I don't want to try this any longer. It's just not meant to be. But what I did tell myself was, what else am I doing? Like, why would I stop trying? Why would I give up? And that with every failed attempt, I felt like my odds of success increased. And I think that's really a key point, to tell yourself is, whether you've had one miscarriage or 3 or 4, your odds are increasing every time that happens. As hard and as difficult as that experience is, with each negative experience, the odds of something wonderful happening just increase. And so that really got me through. A couple of the things that I did personally to help was keeping a daily log of what I ate, of exercises that I did, because you want something tangible to kind of reassure you that you're doing something proactive. And by writing things down in a journal, that was very, very helpful. I wish I hadn't waited so long to see a specialist, but I just, looking back, had no idea that they would offer so much help without any type of really invasive treatment. So that's really just the best advice I could give as far as staying positive is, choose faith over fear every day. And again, you're going to get closer to success with every attempt that you make.
While you're pregnant with your son, were there any other precautions you had to take or extra like doctor's appointments you had to make sure, they could just watch a little more closely?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first trimester, I was still seeing the fertility specialist. So they had me going in weekly, which was amazing because, again, this was right when COVID started, and a lot of the doctor's offices were not seeing any new patients. All elective procedures were put on hold. And it just from different Facebook groups and through the grapevine, I was aware that other people, they weren't even able to go in for these weekly appointments when they were trying to conceive and once they were pregnant. I actually had scheduled an appointment to see a doctor in Chicago. I was supposed to go up there, I think in March, to see a recurrent loss specialist. And they canceled the appointment because of COVID. And then another precaution that I had taken personally was I was going to stop going to the gym just because as an avid fitness enthusiast, I know at some points I probably was working out a bit too often or too intensely, or at least that's how I saw it in my mind. And so with each miscarriage, I kind of eased up on my workouts and said, once I have this next pregnancy, I'm going to walk outside. I'm not going to the gym. Well, lo and behold, I'm pregnant and the gym's closed because there's a pandemic. So I couldn't go to the gym even if I wanted to, which was really, again, just kind of a sign from God saying like, I've got this, you have no control over this pregnancy. Just do what you're doing, stay positive and keep going. I also, within the few months prior to that pregnancy, had just become more aware of my gluten and dairy intake. I can't say that's what helped me sustain this pregnancy, but based on the research that I've read, it indicates that that definitely could be a part of it as well. So that's worth experimenting with. To listeners out there, if you are considering that, definitely do some research, ask people in the industry about it and give it a try.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying just about like evaluating your life. And, I'm sure there's not just one thing that, makes it, for everyone, makes it easier for everyone to get pregnant. But I think it's cool that you were able to be like, okay, I'm gonna make these changes. I'm gonna do this research for myself and just, know that I'm actually doing something tangible that I think is gonna help me. So
Yep.
that's great. Because everyone is so different. So what's gonna help one mom may help, someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what I say to my fitness clients as well is you might not necessarily do well on a keto diet or a plant-based diet. We need to find what works for you. It's the same way when you're trying to conceive. Somebody, might get pregnant after 4 attempts. It might take you, a year and a half or 5 years. It varies so much. So you can't compare yourself to other people.
Absolutely. And so you bring up, being pregnant during the pandemic, which I'm sure was just, you finally are like, you're really excited about this pregnancy. And then it's like the world's like shutting down around us. It's like, what is going on? What was the care like? Did you do like telemedicine or to make sure you're kind of up to date on, your checkups and making sure
Mhm.
that being canceled?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm an introvert by nature. So being pregnant during a pandemic and staying home was an absolute blessing. Like you don't have to buy all the maternity clothes. You don't have to go out in public and have people wonder, is she pregnant or is she not? And so you kind of get out of all the small talk and things like that when you're home during a pregnancy. And my husband and I both took more precautions during the pandemic. We live in Auburn, Alabama, which is miles from either of our families. So it wasn't really an issue as far as going to see people or having get-togethers. We just were kind of on lockdown. And I can remember days where we would go through a drive-through, and I had disinfectant wipes, and I would wipe down the cup. We'd use hand sanitizer right after. And so over time, you become a little bit more comfortable knowing what you can and can't do, or what you're comfortable or not comfortable with. But yeah, those were some of the more extreme things that we did. I used to love going to Target and spending 45 minutes shopping, and then it became curbside pickup instead of going into the store. So just knowing, oh my gosh, I've had 4 miscarriages, I'm pregnant, and now there's this like disease that's going around, this global pandemic that's killing people, and we don't really know why or how. With doctor's appointments, I can remember going to the specialist in that first trimester, those early weeks, and not wearing a mask. Just there really wasn't that standard or that expectation, and I didn't really know how I felt about it personally. And then once you see the nurses in the masks and other people coming in for appointments in the masks, and just as the numbers increased and deaths increased, you're like, okay, I definitely need to be wearing a mask. And I would wear a mask everywhere I went. There was a time when, I was in Target and I, saw people without masks, and you're like trying not to, judge them, but being pregnant, you're like, oh my gosh, like you need to have a mask on, you need to have a mask on. So yeah, just, again, to each their own. People have masks or don't have masks for their own personal reasons. But yeah, I was still going into the specialist for weekly appointments up through the first trimester. From there, I did go to see the OBGYN. And my first appointment, I think, was like week 13 or 14. So fairly soon, fairly early on in that second trimester. And then I don't think I saw her again for like 6 weeks or 4 weeks. It felt like forever, but they basically had me going in just kind of on like the same timeline as somebody who hadn't had all these miscarriages would. So I don't necessarily feel like I got any extra care in that regard, but I think everything leading up to that point indicated that I had a healthy pregnancy and that there was no need for me to be going in weekly like I was during that first trimester. So I felt good about the entire process as I was going in for the appointments. And the hard part was not getting the weekly ultrasounds and seeing my little guy. We didn't know if it was boy or girl. So it was around week 20 that my husband and I were both able to see baby Clancy together on the ultrasound, because again, he wasn't allowed to come to the appointments, only to the ultrasound. So it was just bring yourself. Second and third trimesters, seeing the OBGYN, it was sit in the car, we'll text you, call you to let you know to come on in. And, everybody's in their masks and socially distanced. So definitely a very different experience as far as what I would have expected for a pregnancy. But after going through everything we had, I mean, I would have jumped through hoops and done anything to be where we are now, which is just such a relief knowing what the year 2020 was like and how it ended for us on a positive note.
Yeah, absolutely. So your son is now 8 weeks old, you said. So was he born the end of November?
Yep. He was born November 19th. So my due date was actually on Thanksgiving. He came a few days early. I was scheduled for an induction because I am 39 years old. And with being high risk, they didn't want me to go much later than 39 weeks, but he came a couple days early. And then my family was able to drive down. We were obviously nervous about having my niece and nephew and my mom and sister, but they made the road trip from Chicago to see us. And it was the best homecoming ever when we got back from the hospital and they were all here at the house.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome that you got to still see family and spend time with them. Because I know, especially during the pandemic, I know I've talked to a couple different moms that had babies during the pandemic, and such a different experience, especially if you're like in a new area where you don't get to see family already. It's so like extra lonely.
Yeah.
Were you able to have like your husband in the room with you? I know some hospitals weren't allowing that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was allowed one support person. So obviously that was him. My stepson was with his mom the week prior to the scheduled induction date, just because we wouldn't have had anywhere to send him had I gone in early like I did. So my husband was with me. We were required to wear masks. What I didn't know was that myself, I had to go through a COVID test. And so I actually had 3 COVID tests done. That was the worst part of the whole labor experience. I had a little bit of sinus trouble. And so they did a swab in each nostril as well as my throat, because there was a little bit of blood on the swab, which they can't submit to the lab. So once I was through that, the whole experience was only getting better. That was probably the hardest part about it. I did have an epidural. My doctors and the nurse staff were all extremely helpful and supportive. And so we were at the hospital around 4 p.m. on a Wednesday, and he was born at 4:44 a.m. on Thursday morning.
Awesome. That's really cool. I mean, I just love, yeah, like I was saying, I love hearing your story about just, everything that you went through. And it kind of just feel like I love that you're sharing it too, because, it's powerful and it gives moms, women hope that are, going through that. So I always like to end these interviews with, I call them fun thinking questions. So if you could have a billboard made today where you could share one tip with moms everywhere, what would you have it say?
I would have the billboard say, choose faith over fear. And that really became my mantra, not just throughout the trying to conceive journey, but once I was pregnant. You think, oh, I'm finally pregnant. Hooray, we're having a baby. We've made it through the first trimester. And there's that little bit of relief, but you also don't want to spend your entire pregnancy worried and having the weight of that anxiety on your shoulders. You've gone through so much to get to that point, and you deserve to enjoy it. And so by choosing faith over fear, it was just a daily reminder. I got through today. We got through today. Me and this baby survived another day, and we're that much closer to actually having this child in our arms.
And so I know it's been about 8 weeks now, but what is the best part so far about being a mom?
Oh my goodness, that's a difficult question. I think it's just knowing like this is what I've kind of been waiting for my whole life. My husband has always said, I just want to make you a mom. And seeing him with the baby, seeing my stepson with the baby, and knowing that together we brought him here into this world is just so heartwarming. And knowing that I can stay home. I do some part-time work as a blogger, and some community management work. And so being able to do that remotely while raising this little guy and seeing him every day, it means the world to us.
Awesome. I love that. And so for anyone that hasn't heard of you or doesn't currently follow you, where can everyone follow you and what kind of things do you share on your page?
Absolutely. So my Instagram handle is Megan Meisner Fitness. And I have in the past shared mostly fitness content, which I still do, but now it's geared a little bit more towards moms, obviously. So home workouts, things that don't require you to go to the gym, things that are efficient so you can do them while your baby is napping. There's been a lot of recipe ideas that I've shared. Obviously, the Mommy Knows Best products have received a couple of features as well, just because as a breastfeeding mom, they've really been helpful with milk production. And then I also have an Instagram page. I'm not quite as active on it, but it is called The Fertility Journey. And it's something I created well over a year ago when I was really struggling with trying to conceive. And I remained anonymous. So I wasn't quite ready to jump into that pool of vulnerability at that point and share my story publicly. But it was really a great outlet. And it's something I recommend others consider doing, whether they share their identity or not. I was providing people with inspirational posts while at the same time finding hope in that content as well. And so it really was a nice small community of women who were trying to pursue the same goal. And so I'm still on there now. I had announced that I was pregnant. And so it's a little bit different. If you're looking for content that's going to help you to conceive, that's still there, but with a little bit of a different perception and mind frame, being that now I have a child. So just kind of like throughout this podcast, I've said I want to share my story of hope. And that's what I do through that Instagram platform.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the community just around, fertility, motherhood, postpartum, it's huge. And I think that's the one thing with, social media and internet that is so amazing. Like just with this pandemic, it's amazing that we can still connect with so many different women and moms and during this time, and nothing's going to stop the digital connection. So that's amazing, the community.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, and just like I said earlier, just being vulnerable, because I think it helps. That's why we do this show, is just to give you guys a platform to share different stories and inspire moms that are listening. So I just really appreciate you coming on.
Yes, absolutely. And if anyone wants to reach out, I'd be happy to share more about my personal experience. I have about 6 pages worth of doctor's notes that I didn't really get into, but more specifics as far as what kind of procedures I went through and what supplements and, medication I was given and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be really great. Hey guys, if you found this or any episode of Mom Talks with Krista helpful, please like, comment, subscribe, and of course, share it with your friends. We release new videos every single Wednesday, and our new podcast is out every single Thursday. So lots of different ways you can catch us. And of course, if you're not following us on our socials, go ahead and follow us there. We've got tons of new content for you every single day. And finally, if you're watching this and doubting yourself, you're doing a great job. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.